الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وسندنا ونبينا وشفيعنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله صدق الله مولانا العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We continue our discussion on the objective of Ramadan and the attainment of this objective. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly states in the Quran Kareem that the objective of Ramadan is to gain taqwa. In other words, is to gain a consciousness and a special relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the purpose of a believer. This is the purpose of our existence on this earth. It is to always strive in enhancing and strengthening our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And for this purpose, we started discussing the verses of poetry of my Shaykh Hazrat Maulana Shah Hakeem Muhammad Akhtar Sahab Qaddasallahu Sirrahu, which are drenched in this mahabba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this relationship and this love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we continue that discussion. Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi, in the opening verse of this poetry, states, है इसी तरह से मुमकिन तेरी राह से गुजरना, कभी दिल पे सब्र करना, कभी दिल से शुक्र करना. The only way, the only approach to treading your path, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we discussed that treading Allah's path here means going through life. Every step that we take in life, every breath that we breathe is basically a step in Allah's path. It is treading this path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only approach to life is that kabhi dil pe sabr karna, that sometimes we are to be patient, we are to exercise restraint on our heart and on our desires, and sometimes we are to express gratitude on the fulfillment of our jais, our permissible desires. Sometimes we would have to do, as Hazrat Wala Rahmatullah alayhi says, we will have to do khoon-e tamanna, we will have to sacrifice and slaughter our desires, the desires that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We would have to sacrifice them, slaughter them, you would have to go against them. You would have to take that bitter pill, and no matter what type of discomfort or inconvenience we experience, we would have to tolerate that discomfort. And tolerating that discomfort allows for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enter that heart. And kabhi dil se shukr karna, and at times we would be bestowed with bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would be bestowed with prosperity, and then we are to express our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what is gratitude? There to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us in the Quran Kareem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran Kareem that وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the mu'mineen that we helped you, we provided you with assistance on the occasion of Badr when you were very weak. وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that miraculous victory, 313 ill-equipped Muslims, Sahaba Ikram, were victorious over 1,000 well-equipped men, and in a miraculous way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them victory. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now how do you express gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Exercise taqwa. Again, use those ni'mats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, use those bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be pleased with their use. Do not misuse the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us our faculties, our senses, our eyes, our ears, our hearing. So we are to use these bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are obviously priceless. Ask somebody who doesn't have eyesight. Ask somebody who cannot hear. What is the value of these bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So we are to use them in the avenues, in the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not displeased with. That is the shukr. That is the actual gratitude that we are to show to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hazrat Wala rahmatullah alayhi goes on to say, ye teri raza mein jeena, ye teri raza mein marna, ye teri raza mein jeena, ye teri raza mein marna, मेरी अब्दियत पे या रब ये है तेरा फजल करना. Here Hazrat Wala rahmatullah alayhi teaches us that when we are bestowed with the ability and tawfiq to do something righteous, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the opportunity and the tawfiq to obey Him, then we are not to consider that to be something that we are entitled to or something that is of our innate and intrinsic virtue, that we are good in ourselves and thus we were able to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A dua that has been reported in the narrations at the end of salah. Salah is an ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala via salah. But at the end of that salah, before salam, one dua that is narrated is Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi zulman kathira وَلَا يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ فَاغْفِرْ لِي مَغْفِرَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِكَ وَارْحَمْنِي إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. The gist of which is, Ya Allah, I have oppressed myself meaning I have committed a sin, or I have not obeyed you, I have not worshipped you, I have not performed this salah as it ought to have been performed. So Ya Allah, forgive me. Ya Allah, forgive me. I have oppressed myself tremendously. Zulman kathira. So Ya Allah, forgive me. In other words, I haven't fulfilled the right of the salah. And that is what we are taught by the Sharia in all of our ibadah. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the tawfiq of obeying Him, of doing some act of virtue, then we are to realize that this is only the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has allowed us to obey Him, and that act of virtue can never fulfill the right of the ibadah, of the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are to be firstly grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq, and not to think that this was in us, that we had this ability to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, it is only the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then to be remorseful and regretful over the fact that this ibadah cannot do justice to the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Hazrat Wala Rahmatullah Alayhi says, Ye teri raza mein jeena, ye teri raza mein marna. Living a life of your pleasure, Ya Allah, and dying a death of your pleasure, Ya Allah, it is not from my own ability, it is not my virtue, it is not something that I was capable of. Meri abdiyat pe ya Rab yet hai tera fazl karna. It is actually nothing but your grace, your raham, your karam, that you have afforded me this opportunity. You have given me this tawfiq of your ibadat, of your abdiyat, being your servant, of your servitude. Thereafter, Hazrat Wala Rahmatullah Alayhi says, यही इश्क की अलामत, यही इश्क की ज़मानत, कभी ज़िक्र हो ज़ुबां से, कभी दिल में याद करना. This is the sign of ishq, of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whilst it is a sign of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is also the guarantee of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What? Kabhi zikr ho zuban se, kabhi dil mein yaad karna. That at times you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your tongue, and at times you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your heart. So this is the sign of an Allah wala. This is the sign of a person who has a consistent relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is not only the sign, if a person begins to tread this path and he begins to practice this, that at all times he is in a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes he is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his tongue, and sometimes he is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his heart. Then this would guarantee him, if he hasn't yet acquired the level of mahabba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the awliya have, then he can be rest assured that inshallah yahi ishq ki zamanat. This is what guarantees that level of mahabba and ishq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All you have to do is try your level best to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. And it is not something unnatural or unusual. Hazrat Maulana Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani Sahab, Damat Barakatuh, my Ustad and Sheikh, he mentions a very easy way of acquiring this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a very practical way of acquiring this consistent ta'alluq with Allah. And he says that a person is not void of any of 2 or 3 conditions in his life. At any particular moment, at any given moment in a person's life, he is either in need of something, right? So when he's in need of something, a person just needs to get into this practice of asking for that thing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't have to even bring that dua on his tongue. He can ask it in his heart. A person is going home from this program, for example, and he is in need of something to eat or something to drink, or so just before partaking of that, he makes a quick dua. Ya Allah, I'm going home, make that available for me. Ya Allah, I'm going home, allow my family to be in a good condition, allow them not to have been afflicted by any harm. Right? And when a person begins to practice on this, and he makes it a habit, then automatically his heart, kabhi dil se yaad karna, his heart is always with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not something difficult. It just requires a little bit of practice, and just consciousness. And Hazrat Mufti Sahib mentions that this person reaches those heights of the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that people around him don't even imagine. That in his heart he's just with this constant ta'alluq with Allah, nobody even knows, and he is treading this path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's gaining proximity upon proximity, and this nur is being created in his heart. So Hazrat Mufti Sahib mentions that one condition is that a person is in need of something. So when he is in need of something, he makes it a habit of quickly just asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You adopt the means, obviously. You adopt the means towards that need. But making those means effective and allowing those means to lead to the desired outcome and goal, that is only in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. It comes in a hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us that even when a person's shoelace snaps, then he should seek a solution from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, you adopt the means, you go to the shoemaker or whatever, but before that, immediately you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that goes for anything in our life. This, in the hadith, it was an example showing that even something that we regard as trivial, the solution of which needs to be sought from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one condition of a person is that a person is in need. The second condition of a person is that he has acquired something, he has gained something, and he is now happy about this thing that he has acquired. So there, you feel that happiness, definitely, it's natural, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also wants to see a person happy upon him being bestowed with the ni'mats of Allah. But at the same time, whether on your tongue or in your heart, you remember the giver of that ni'mah and you make shukr. You express your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the second condition of a person. And the third condition that by and large everybody goes through is the condition of fear. You have an apprehension of the future, that I hope this doesn't happen. Right? It can be an apprehension of this dunya or an apprehension of the akhirah. There you seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, I'm fearing that this might happen. Ya Allah, save me from this. So with this mindset, basically, there's no mujahada required, it's just consciousness and the simple mindset that a person adopts, and then he becomes in a consistent state of ta'alluq ma'Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that. And when a person becomes in this consistent state, Hazrat Wala says, Yahi ishq ki alamat, yahi ishq ki zamanat. It is the sign of the Allah Walas that they have this constant connection with Allah. And if a person hasn't yet reached that stage, then it is the guarantee that if a person starts doing this, then inshallah he will definitely reach that state, whether people around him come to know of it or not. But inshallah in the akhirah he will come to know of the value of this ta'alluq ma'Allah. Thereafter Hazrat Wala rahmatullah alayhi goes on to say मेरी जिंदगी का हासिल, मेरी जीस्त का सहारा, तेरे आशिकों में जीना, तेरे आशिकों में मरना. Allahu Akbar. This Hazrat Wala Rahmatullah Ali says that the essence, the crux, the gist of my life and my only the support of my life, मेरी जीस्त का सहारा, तेरे आशिकों में जीना, तेरे आशिकों में मरना, is Ya Allah to live in the company of your lovers and to die in the company of your lovers. So, what is acquired by the company of the lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Again, it is this relationship, it is this mahabba, it is this love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran Kareem, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu attaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. And in another place in the Quran Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines who are the as-sadiqeen. أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. That, those who have believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear Allah, ittaqullah, gain this quality of taqwa, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, become in a constant state of ta'alluq and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, and spend your life, spend your time in the company of the true people of truth. And the people of truth are the people of taqwa, the people who have acquired this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Hazrat Maulana Mufti Muhammad Shafi Sahab Qaddasallahu Sirrahu, he mentions when explaining this verse that taqwa, the true reality of taqwa, sometimes might seem to be an onerous task to acquire it, because being in a constant state of ta'alluq ma Allah, it might seem at first to be slightly overwhelming. But it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sunnah in the Quran Kareem that whenever He gives a command that sometimes may seem to be a little bit onerous and overwhelming for the believers, He provides an easy way to acquire that and to fulfill that command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what Allah has done in this verse as well. He said that adopt taqwa, this is my command. But an easy way of acquiring that taqwa is be with those who have taqwa. Stay in their company, and that company would, inshallah, have its effect. You don't have to even listen to any long speech or long bayan. You just have to stay with somebody who has taqwa, who lives his life according to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you are consistent with it, a person will feel this change in his heart and this change in his life. We just conclude with one last verse of poetry. Hazrat Wala Rahmatullah alayhi, he concludes this long nazam of his with this verse of poetry in which he says, Kisi ahl dil ki suhbat jo mili kisi ko akhtar, उसे आ गया है जीना, उसे आ गया है मरना. The gist of which is that this suhbah of the Ahlullah, this being in the companionship of those people who have this very special relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not just something that gives a person taqwa and a better life in the hereafter, it is something which allows a person to live a good life in this world as well. And a person gets to know the way of living life, the way of living a fulfilled life in this world as well as inshallah in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the reality and grant us true taqwa and grant us the objective of Ramadan and His love, His ma'rifat. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد خاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم اجعلنا ممن وفق لقيام ليلة القدر. اللهم اجعلنا ممن صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا فغفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن قام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا فغفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن قام ليلة القدر إيمانا واحتسابا فغفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب عمل يقربنا إلى حبك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.